Hi, hey, Russ here. Welcome back to my shop. This is a Rambling Russ video, but it's kind of based on the last two legacy videos I did about the new milling table. And after the how to build video, I got several questions, and a couple of them are related to the legacy and a couple of them weren't. So I thought I'd kind of go over what I in this video those. The first one is from a guy named Cole. That first off, Cole, I'm sorry I accidentally deleted your message, but I did get it. And I just wanted to let you know he was asking about comparing a 900 to the 1200 on dimensions. And so I quickly put together this little chart here of the 900 and the 1200. This is the length, maximum length it can have, the piece. The piece can be maximum diameter and the maximum width for flat milling. So depending on what you're doing, those are the comparison between the two. But after I did that, then I went back and I pulled out my old magazines. And I'm sure that a lot of you older users remember these when they were coming out. And I think I have pretty much all of these still. But what was interesting is on page, whatever page it is, oh, yes. Recognize him? Huh? This is from 2004. Huh? He didn't have any hair back then either. Anyway, I'm sorry. I don't mean to bust your chops. It happens. Anyway, just so you know, this is the chart for the machines that they had out at that time. And they're in the columns. And down at the bottom of this, it shows the dimensions, the capacity on these machines. And check out those prices. I don't think those prices are good anymore. So, but that's what they cost back in 2004. And that's pretty close to when I bought mine, 2003 or 2004. So, but that's that chart. And he wanted to know about the comparison. If you need more information on that, let me know. If I've got it, I'll share it. So, the next thing that they talked to me about is they asked me about the wing nuts. And I thought they were talking about the wing nuts on the leg vise itself that clamp the leg down, this one here. And this particular wing nut is, I did make it. My ready rod is a 5/8 ready rod. And all I did to make this is I just took a regular nut that matches the 5/8 rod, and I took two pieces of wood and I drilled a hole half the distance of the thickness of my nut into each of them. And the width of that diameter was the width across the flat of the nut. And then I finished drilling the hole out also bigger for the rest of it. And so that way the threads on the ready rod will not touch the wood. They'll only touch the nut inside, which is what's important. You want that to spin on the threads and not have the wood bind the nut as it spins. And I put it in there, sandwiched it in between the two, glued it together, and this was just a 4x2 inch block, probably a 3/4 of an inch thick on both pieces. And when I put it all together, then I just cut it to a shape that was pleasing and something I could get my fingers on to be able to turn it easily and get some torque. And this works out pretty good. So that's all there is to that. It's just a piece of ash glued up with the nut in the middle. Nothing to it. Now, he may have been talking about the wing nuts that were on my table that hold the table to my rail. And on there I have the T-track bolt in the T-track, and then it sticks up, and then I put these little wing nuts on the T-bolt and lock it down, usually opposite corners on each part of the table to hold it in place. And these are 5 minutes to make. Nothing fancy at all. It's just a piece of MDF. That is just a 5/16 nut, same as the thread on the T-bolt. And all I did was drill a hole that was 1/2 inch, which happens to be the dimension of the nut across the flat part of the nut. And I just drove it down into the MDF. And when I got done, I cut it down to the shape I wanted. And I cut it down to the thickness I wanted for this one. Since it's just a nut, I didn't have to leave it so thick, and that's all there is to it. On this one, it's just a T nut, and it has a little thicker because the barrel of the T-nut is a little longer. So I left this one 3/4. The only thing you have to watch out when you're doing a wing nut this way is they're not ambidextrous. Always make sure that your bolt's going in from the back side and not directly into the nut on this side, because you want it, as this pulls down, it's going to try to pull that nut through the MDF. If you put it in this way, it'll actually pull the nut out. So always make sure you put it on this way and you won't have any problem with it. No glue, no crazy glue, no epoxy, no nothing. It's just friction held, and so far I've not had any problem with it. If I did, I'd take the nut, drill a new piece out, and drop it, drive it in with a hammer, and go again. It's no big deal. And they work real well, and they're cheap, quick. I make these all the time. I use them around the shop. I keep them there so I can just grab one as I need it. I don't have to go hunting for them. So there's plenty of them over there. So I have a drawer where I keep all that type of hardware in, so I can open that drawer and look in there and get out what I need to do an attachment and decide what I need in just a matter of seconds. So that works pretty well. So that's about the wing nut. The last thing I want to talk about is that they mentioned about how well my bench dogs, how I got the bench dogs to fit the hole so nicely. And so actually I make my own dowels most of the time. I have this dowel making drill bits over there. This is the top plate of it. There's 5 different sizes that they come in, from 1 inch down to 3/8 of an inch. And these things are actually pretty awesome to have in the shop. And if you're going to do bench dogs or do dowel joinery, these are really well worth having. They're probably not real cheap, but you do have to take care of them. When you use these things, you gotta lube them. Keep them clean, especially on the inside of it. Don't let that build up. And then I always use that WD silicone spray, and I spray it on the inside here to keep it lubricated, because as that dowel is being created up through the dowel hole, this is rubbing on the inside, and this thing will bind and get hot. It'll make this bit 3 times hotter than it should be, it could be, if you keep it lubricated. So just keep that. I spray it once before I start doing dowels. If I'm doing a lot of them, I may spray it in between as I go along. I kind of feel it and see how hot it's getting. And the hotter it gets, the more likely I'm going to spray it to keep it lubed. And that helps a lot when you're drilling them out. But I make them, a lot of times I'll make dowels 20 or 50 at a time. To make your dowels is really pretty straightforward. You just take a block of wood, make sure your grain is oriented up and down, and the straighter the grain is, the straighter your grain on your dowel will be when you're done. This one was done on a little bit more curvy piece of wood, and this one isn't as good as this one. But this one, in fact, if you look at it, you can see there's a crack in it where apparently it wasn't even dry, and the grain actually cracked on the end of it. And now this dowel on the end is much tighter going in on this end than it is on this end. So actually that has some advantages to having that swell up like that. I'm actually thinking now about taking something like this and driving a wedge into one end about a 1/2 inch down to whiten this up just enough that this end would then go in tight. So when you then put it in your hole, as it goes through and you reach the other end, it'll get really super tight and make it much tighter in the hole. So I'm kind of playing with that and what to do with them, but making them fit is really kind of tricky. I agree. You have to keep in mind one basic principle. If you want a dowel to fit, you want to use the same drill always. So you got to get to know your drill bits and know which one you want to use the dowels. Like these dowels that are made from those, I get a much better fit here with my Forstner bit than I do with my paddle bit. Here, it's much looser. And so if I want a real tight fit with this, like when I'm doweling up something, I might use the Forstner bit. But if I wanted to be a looser fit, get plenty of glue in there, then I'll actually drill it with my paddle bit instead, because I know my paddle bit will give me a little looser fit than my Forstner bit does. And I have one particular bit that I use in my whole shop for my 3/4 inch dowels, bench dogs. I use them everywhere. As you probably noticed if you watched any of my other videos, they're everywhere. So But I use that one bit. It's a paddle bit, 3/4 inch, and that's what I use to drill all my holes. To drill it straight in, I made a little jig for my paddle bit, so I know I'm getting a straight hole with that paddle bit. And I actually prefer drilling most of my holes with a paddle bit than I do with a Forstner bit, because you know as well as I do that when you're drilling down in that with that Forstner bit, you got to pull it out and cool it off and clean it out constantly to drill. But that paddle bit, you just right on through. So I do prefer them. So anyway, making my own dowels is a good thing. Make sure that you know what bit your bits and get to know them and how they fit the hole. When you put dowels in around my shop, I always use only the one bit. And if I ever get to a point where the dowel is not fitting very well in the hole, for example, if I take this one and my 3/4 inch and I put it in here, it's a nice fit. But then I come back and I put another one in here, and this thing is loose as a goose. I don't try to fix the hole to hold everything. What I do is I try to fix the dowel. If it's too tight, I know that dowel is soaking up and it's probably a humid day. And there are days when I use my hammer. And I keep a bunch of these around everywhere. And I use this to tap my dowels in and out. And yes, there are hammer days around here. And there are days when you don't need a hammer. So, but if they get real loose, sometimes I'll throw a piece of tape on it this way in one place. And then I put it in there and then it gives me a tighter fit. Sometimes I take 2 pieces like this one. Sometimes if I wanted to go in but I don't want it to fall through, I'll actually wrap the tape one time around this way, or sometimes 2 tapes, depends on what I'm doing. That way when I drop it in, I still have an even surface around here, so when I butt up against it, it's not going to throw off my depth, especially like if I have 2 of them together and I'm using them both as a fence system. So I try to make sure that they don't get too loose. If they do, I start looking at it very seriously, and sometimes they end up being dowels in my glue-ups, because I use dowels and glue-ups all the time. So sometimes they end up going there. But never try to adapt the hole to your bench dog. If you're having a problem, if here with this, there's a good chance if I walk over there and put this in one of those dog holes, it's going to have the same problem. It's not the hole. And so you want to make sure all your holes are nice and straight. If you get a hole, I use some of my bench dog holes more than others. And yes, they wear. As they wear and it starts to get loose, and I see that all my dowels are starting to fit loose into that, then what I tend to do is I get my boiled linseed oil out and I take a little brush and I brush that dowel down in there and then let it dry overnight. And then the next day I start using that bench dog again and it fits a little tighter. I'm adding a little bit of boiled linseed oil to that. Once it cures completely, then it works a lot better. So I can do that, but that's all I ever do to my bench dog holes. If I have a real problem with it, quite honestly, what I would probably do, and I've never had to, but I'm preparing to do that, is I would take a piece of something. I don't know what it would be. Probably, I might even use MDF itself and make a plug that fits into here, and then glue that up and drill that in, and then come back and re-drill that hole again to make it loose and to make it tight again if I have to. I've never had to do that. If I had to, it wouldn't be a big deal. I would probably like a 3/4 inch hole. I would just finally drill that out to a 1 inch, make a 1 inch dowel, put it in the hole and glue it up, remark my hole and drill it back with my 3/4 inch in that repair. So you can fix the holes pretty easily so they always fit. But you got to know your drill bits. And you have to pay attention to the humidity that you have. Right now, I keep a humidity meter in my shop. And right now it's 32%. So I know it's reasonably good in here for humidity of the wood. Some days it can be 80% humidity in here. And so it just depends on the weather. And on those days, this is my best friend when it comes to my bench dogs. So anyway, that's the thing in a nutshell about bench dogs. And hopefully you learned something about them here. So I think I've been rambling on enough. I do want to thank you for stopping by. If you have any comments or any thoughts, please leave them below. I do read them all, and I appreciate them. If you like this video, say so. Most importantly, please you come back again because there's plenty more to come. You have a good day.